It'd be so funny to me. Every single time Jay-Z is in hot water, Beyonce wants to put out something showing black love. Look at us, we're such a good family. We're so amazing.
But here's my thought, okay? I think that Jay-Z and Beyonce are master manipulators of the media. And I also think, yeah. And I think that they are to the point, they will manipulate almost anything. Like, I think it's bad karma to lie about this.
Wendy Williams has made another headline-grabbing comment, this time about Jay-Z, and it's getting people talking all over again. According to Wendy, if even part of the long-running rumors surrounding Jay-Z were ever proven true, it would paint a very different picture of one of music's most famous marriages. For years, Jay-Z's past infidelity has been the subject of intense public discussion. Beyoncé famously explored themes of betrayal and healing through her music, while Jay-Z later reflected on his own personal mistakes in both interviews and lyrics. Then there was the infamous elevator incident involving Solange, a moment that sparked years of speculation about what may have happened behind closed doors. But Wendy suggested the story could go far beyond cheating. She pointed to long-running rumors claiming Jay-Z may have fathered a secret child and allegedly kept another family hidden from the public. Those claims have circulated online for years, but have never been substantiated or confirmed by credible evidence. From Wendy's perspective, there is a major difference between surviving infidelity and discovering that life-changing information had allegedly been kept secret before a marriage even began. She argued that if someone learned only after saying, "I do," that their spouse had concealed something that's significant, it could completely change the way they viewed their entire relationship. Whether those long-standing rumors have any basis in fact remains unknown. However, Wendy's comments have once again revived a conversation that has followed Jay-Z and Beyoncé for years, leaving many people wondering why these allegations continue to resurface and why they still generate so much public attention. So, let's take a closer look at where these claims came from, why they continue to circulate, and what's actually been said over the years.
Jay-Z sold black people out. And the sooner that y'all realize this, the much better off we will be as a collective. The first thing that people say in relation to Jay-Z, whether it be speculatory what's coming out about him or whether it be a fact, that man said he left condoms in a car seat, he sold crack to his own mama. Then I'm not going to start saying things I don't know to be true, but why do you guys ever think that somebody like that is going to be a collective person? The files said about Jay-Z, and you guys know what files I'm talking about, that why do we need to control the black community when we have people like...
Beyoncé recently released a new promotional video for her hair care brand, Secret, and while fans expected the spotlight to stay on her, one unexpected detail ended up dominating the conversation. Surprisingly, it was Jay-Z who became the biggest talking point. During the voiceover, Beyoncé revealed that Jay-Z had been growing out his hair because he wanted to wear an afro during his performance at the Roots picnic. But what really captured people's attention wasn't the hairstyle itself, it was the reason behind it. According to Beyoncé, Jay-Z wanted to help their daughter, Blue Ivy, feel proud of her natural hair and embrace it with confidence. She explained that his decision was meant to encourage Blue to see the beauty in her own natural texture. That heartfelt moment quickly spread across social media. Many fans praised Jay-Z for the gesture, calling it a touching example of a father supporting his daughter. Others said it showed a more personal side of the couple that the public rarely gets to see. What started as a simple promotion for Beyoncé's hair care brand unexpectedly turned into a conversation about family, fatherhood, and the message the couple hoped to send about confidence and embracing natural beauty.
But it was always beautiful that the real reason Jay grew out his hair was to show Blue that her hair was light.
As the commercial continued, Beyoncé appeared smiling as she danced around Jay-Z, gently combing and styling his hair. Together, they looked every bit like a happy, united couple, and it didn't take long for the internet to start reading between the lines. One thing many fans have noticed over the years is that the Carters rarely respond directly to rumors or online speculation. Instead, they often let their projects speak for themselves. Because of that, viewers quickly came up with different interpretations of the video. Some believed it was exactly what it appeared to be, a heartfelt, family-focused commercial promoting Beyoncé's Secret hair care brand. Others wondered whether the timing was simply convenient, especially after social media had spent days joking about Jay-Z's hairstyle. But once fans saw Beyoncé personally styling Jay-Z's cornrows on camera, another theory quickly gained traction online. Some viewers speculated that the video also helped reinforce a positive public image for Jay-Z at a time when he was once again facing criticism. There's no evidence that was the campaign's purpose, but the theory spread rapidly across social media. Part of that conversation centered on Jay-Z's decision to partner with Target for an exclusive vinyl release celebrating the 30th anniversary of Reasonable Doubt. The collaboration immediately sparked debate, because some consumers had been boycotting Target following changes to the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Critics argued that someone with Jay-Z's influence should have anticipated that the partnership would upset part of his audience. Others pointed out that an album as influential as Reasonable Doubt could likely have found plenty of other retail partners, making the Target collaboration even more controversial in their eyes. Social media reactions were divided. One user wrote, "Jay-Z has always been an opportunist. At what point are we going to stop supporting people who don't seem to care about us?" He did the same thing during the Colin Kaepernick and NFL controversy when he said, "We are past kneeling." Another commenter posted, "Jay-Z isn't stopping my boycott. The Target boycott continues. I don't need his music that badly." Not everyone agreed with those criticisms, however. Many fans dismissed the controversy entirely, arguing that Beyoncé's Secret campaign was simply a personal, family-oriented advertisement with no hidden agenda. To them, the commercial was about natural hair, family, and celebrating Black beauty, not public relations. Others remained unconvinced, believing that the warm, affectionate moments between Beyoncé and Jay-Z naturally helped improve his public image, while criticism surrounding the Target partnership was still circulating. Whether that was a carefully planned strategy or simply a coincidence remains open to interpretation. Either way, the campaign accomplished one thing without question: it kept people talking long after the commercial ended.
Jay-Z popping out looking dumb. I don't understand what the Beyonce thing coming on the internet doing a 7-minute narration was gonna do to prove anything. Didn't nobody care when the stylist came out and the stylist was saying anything. Didn't nobody care when Mama Tina came out and Mama Tina tried to defend it. So y'all then had to try to send Beyonce? Isn't this what Jay-Z did exactly with the casino and why he was denied even the casino? Because he sat there and tried to leverage Beyonce? It's like, Beyonce, what are you on a 360 deal with Jay-Z or something? Because it seems like every single time something negative or something is not going your way in the media, you have to pop out and subtly try to defend.
According to Wendy Williams, one reason Beyoncé often appears to stand by Jay-Z during periods of controversy is because their personal lives, business ventures, public image, and legacy have become deeply connected. From Wendy's perspective, every major headline involving Jay-Z doesn't just impact him, it affects the entire Carter brand. Wendy also argued that Jay-Z has never been afraid to make bold business decisions if he believes they'll benefit him financially. She went even further by revisiting long-running rumors that Jay-Z may have children from previous relationships. Those claims have circulated for years, but many have never been publicly confirmed and remain the subject of speculation. One name that frequently resurfaces whenever people revisit Jay-Z's past is Carmen Bryan. Carmen Bryan is the mother of Nas's daughter, Destiny, and her relationship with both rappers became part of one of hip-hop's most legendary rivalries. As the story has been told over the years, Nas and Jay-Z were already locked in a bitter feud when Jay-Z reportedly began showing interest in Carmen. In her memoir and subsequent interviews, Carmen described that period as one of the most difficult times in her life. She explained that her relationship with Nas was already falling apart when Jay-Z entered the picture. Reflecting on the situation, Carmen admitted, "He was cheating. I was cheating. The problem wasn't that I cheated, it was who I cheated with. Had it been someone nobody knew, it probably wouldn't have become such a huge issue. But I became involved with someone in the same music industry." The controversy intensified after Jay-Z appeared to reference the relationship in one of his diss records aimed at Nas. According to Carmen's account, Nas confronted her after hearing the song because he wanted to know exactly what had happened before deciding how he would respond in his own music. Another claim that has circulated for years is that Carmen became pregnant during that period but later suffered a miscarriage. Carmen has publicly spoken about experiencing a miscarriage, though speculation surrounding Jay-Z's connection to that chapter has remained disputed and has never been established as fact. Over the years, some commentators have offered their own interpretations of Jay-Z's motives during that time. Those opinions vary widely and should be understood as commentary rather than verified fact. What is clear is that whatever relationship existed between Jay-Z and Carmen eventually came to an end. Not long afterward, Nas released Ether, the explosive diss track that many hip-hop fans still consider one of the greatest battle records ever made. The song permanently elevated the rivalry between Jay-Z and Nas, turning their feud into one of the defining moments in rap history, a chapter that continues to be debated decades later.
Yes, I had a miscarriage.
Okay, this was before the whole
This
takeover.
is like
Okay.
before all of that.
How far along were you?
I believe I was definitely less than 3 months. It was the first
Okay.
trimester. Yeah, it wasn't.
It was still early.
Exactly. Yeah, it wasn't anything
Okay.
crazy. It wasn't planned. It wasn't like, oh, we're gonna have this baby and, move forward with our No.
Okay. When you told Jay that you were pregnant, what was his reaction?
I told him after the fact.
Oh, you told him after?
I told him
the
after
miscarriage.
the
Okay,
fact.
so he didn't even know.
No.
According to Wendy Williams' version of events, the story surrounding Carmen Bryan and Jay-Z was far more complicated than many people realized. Wendy argued that Carmen genuinely believed the relationship was real and that the two of them had a future together. According to Wendy's commentary, Jay-Z allegedly made significant promises, talked about marriage, showered Carmen with attention, and gave her expensive gifts. Wendy suggested that Carmen trusted those promises, only to later feel she had been misled as the rivalry between Jay-Z and Nas escalated. As Wendy tells it, the relationship eventually unraveled, and Carmen ultimately chose to stand by Nas rather than continue any connection with Jay-Z. Wendy also revisited long-running rumors that Carmen privately dealt with a pregnancy during that period and kept it out of the public eye for a time. As Jay-Z's relationship with Beyoncé reportedly became more serious, Wendy suggested there would have been even greater reasons for those matters to remain private. Those stories have circulated for many years, but numerous details have never been independently confirmed and remain the subject of speculation. According to Wendy, if those allegations had become public while Jay-Z and Beyoncé were building their reputation as one of entertainment's most powerful couples, the fallout could have been enormous. She also claimed that Jay-Z never fully disclosed everything about his past before his relationship with Beyoncé became serious. That claim remains disputed and has not been verified. One thing Wendy Williams has never tried to hide is her opinion of Jay-Z and Beyoncé. Over the years, she has openly criticized the couple, at one point describing them as master manipulators, because she believed they carefully managed their public image and controlled what the public was allowed to know about their marriage. Even so, Wendy maintained that if her interpretation of these events were accurate, Beyoncé would have been in a much stronger position had she known everything before walking down the aisle. Whether people agree with Wendy's perspective or completely reject it, her comments have once again revived years of rumors and speculation surrounding one of the entertainment industry's most closely watched marriages.
You're not a credible source, because if you were, then you would know. I've never partied with them. I've never been to their house. I don't swim in their pool. Like, we're not friends. I'm a pop culture pundit and commentator, right? That's what you call it. Pop culture woman. And I talk about people. and what they're doing when they're celebrities like you. So we're not friends, but I do.
According to Wendy Williams, the story involving Carmen Bryan and Jay-Z is far more layered than the public has been led to believe. In Wendy's view, Carmen wasn't simply caught up in a celebrity scandal. She genuinely believed she was building a future with Jay-Z. Wendy claimed that Jay-Z allegedly made serious promises, spoke about marriage, lavished Carmen with attention, and gave her expensive gifts that convinced her the relationship was headed somewhere meaningful. According to Wendy's interpretation, Carmen invested emotionally in those promises, only to later feel she had been misled as the feud between Jay-Z and Nas intensified. As Wendy tells the story, everything eventually fell apart, and Carmen ultimately chose to stand beside Nas rather than continue pursuing a future with Jay-Z. But Wendy didn't stop there. She also revisited long-standing rumors alleging that Carmen privately experienced a pregnancy during that chapter of her life and chose to keep it out of the public eye for a period of time. Those claims have circulated for years, but many of the details have never been independently verified and remain the subject of ongoing speculation. According to Wendy, the timing made those rumors especially significant. She argued that as Jay-Z and Beyoncé were beginning to establish themselves as one of entertainment's ultimate power couples, any controversy connected to his past could have dramatically changed the public narrative surrounding their relationship. Wendy went even further, suggesting that Jay-Z never fully revealed everything about his past before his relationship with Beyoncé became serious. That allegation remains disputed and has not been substantiated. One thing Wendy Williams has never been shy about, however, is her opinion of Jay-Z and Beyoncé. Over the years, she has repeatedly criticized the couple, at one point calling them master manipulators, because she believed they were exceptionally skilled at controlling their public image and deciding which parts of their personal lives the public was allowed to see. From Wendy's perspective, if her version of events were accurate, Beyoncé would have been in a far stronger position had she known every detail before marrying Jay-Z. Whether people see Wendy's comments as honest analysis or simply controversial opinion, they continue to reignite conversations that have followed Jay-Z and Beyoncé for years. Decades later, the rumors, unanswered questions, and competing versions of the story still fuel debate whenever their names make headlines.